Ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to the Iron Bark podcast, and I am your host, Epion. And today, I'm just going to talk about a discussion I had. I guess you could call it a heated debate. I don't even think it was heated. Well, maybe they got heated. I don't know. Anyway, basically, it's about photography. So, you've all seen these reels or these photos on Instagram where people are sharing pictures where it's like, here's the unedited version, and then side by side, or like the reel will change. It'll show you, like, oh, here's the edited version. And the edited version looks a lot more visually stunning. It's more compelling. It's nicer to look at. It's less, grainy. It's less foggy. It's less blurry. All these things. So it kind of started a discussion, a debate, if you will, on what is photography. And I decided to say, I think photography is better as raw. I think once you start heavily editing your photos, you get further away from the truth and reality. So it kind of got into a bit of a philosophical debate on what is the exact purpose of photography. For me, and I don't know, I think for Joe Normie as well, photography is supposed to be an accurate depiction or capture of the photons. So, like the light, which you are experiencing as a human, and you're capturing a moment in time, like an actual moment, and then you're sharing it with people. And the more sort of unique or rare that moment in time is, the more sort of impactful that photo is. It's like, oh my God, I can't believe you captured that moment, on camera. And now you're able to share it with the world. Like, let alone just experiencing that moment, like by yourself, is pretty miraculous. But seeing it with a camera and being able to share that with people, now this is a great photo. This is a great thing that happened. And it could be something as simple as I don't know, a mother bear with her cubs doing something kind of funny or unusual, whatever the case might be. We all know that one photo with the bird with like a weasel flying on its back. So when I said it was getting less realistic, or it's not an accurate depiction of reality, some people got extremely bothered by that. And I didn't think it would really bother that many people because I don't feel I don't know. I feel like maybe they interpreted it as, by not being an accurate depiction of reality, as being less valid, not as beautiful, uh, lesser skill involved, etc., etc. And that's not what I meant, because I can still look at edited photos and think, wow, this is like a really beautiful photo. This took a lot of skill in editing program. This took time, this like energy, this like effort, and it's still stunning. Like, we see them all the time. I like them all the time on Instagram. Like, the proof is in the pudding on that. But some people, I feel like, I don't know, they might have been offended by saying it's not an accurate depiction of reality. But I'm gonna have to stand firm in this belief and say I don't think it is, because if you take an image and you brighten up the colors to like an extent on which the actual color of that bird or that lake or the sky wasn't actually that color, and nor will it ever be that color, nor close to how anybody may, like, we may all perceive color slightly differently, because I can't really see the world through other people's eyes, but I assume there has been studies done where people can see color to like better varying degrees. Like, you could show them like a bunch of different cubes off by like a fraction of a shade, and they could like delineate which ones are brighter and which ones are darker, while some people can't. And there's obviously people that have like color blindness, etc. But that sky is likely never going to be purple to mostly anybody, unless there's like some sort of color blindness or whatever. But even then, when they see it on the computer, they'll see it as they saw it. I'm getting too thick into the weeds here. What I'm trying to say is, it's not an accurate depiction of reality. And when you put that on, a gallery or on the internet, and somebody looks at it and they go, wow, that's a really beautiful photo. I can't believe they captured that. But what they never really mention is that, well, this is actually like a composite photo. It's many photos layered over one another, or it's like heavily tooled with like an editing program. And at that point in time, it's really not really an accurate depiction of the photons or the light that was captured in that moment. It's actually more closely described as digital art. You digitally altered it to such an extent that it's no longer what it actually was. And some people try tirelessly to make it seem like if they take a bad photo, it's blurry, it's too distant, whatever the case, or it was too lighting was bad. They'll try to replicate what it should look like or what they thought it looked like as best they can. And that's where I think like editing is appropriate, right? You're trying to like, the way I see editing is that you can take your camera into the wild, take a picture. You have the perfect lens, the perfect settings, the perfect angle. Let's say you just somehow, because that's really difficult to do all that stuff in the wild, especially with wildlife photography. Very rarely is your subject going to stay still for that long. Very rarely are you going to be in the best position. Very rarely you're going to have the best suited lens for what it's happening in the distance and the angle. But yeah, the list goes on. So you try to make up for some of those shortcomings in the field by taking that photo back home and editing it. Now, this is where it can get kind of spicy. I would put it to you that, or the people listening, that editing has become too much of a focus in photography and less people are focused on actually capturing a really good shot by itself in RAW. And people are just snapping the photo, getting a general shape of what they want or an idea, and then taking it back home and spending hours on it there. Now, if you're spending more time digitally altering your photo than you are actually capturing the photo itself, then probably your photo is actually better described as digital art as opposed to a photograph. Now, people also made some very good points. They say, well, you're already not taking an accurate picture of reality or representation of reality because the camera itself digitally alters what you're actually seeing. And it's true, when you look at the camera screen and you look at what you're looking in front of you, you'll compare the two and you'll say, oh, it doesn't really look like that or it's slightly different. And this is especially prevalent in camera phones. And this is the criticism of camera phones, because people say, oh, they're not real pictures. They make it more idealist, or they make it more like ideal looking, which is true. But how can on one end of the spectrum you criticize a phone for not being like a real photo because it's like a digitally altered version right out the gate, but then you can take it home and basically do what you'll take your Canon home, or whatever brand you use, you'll load up that photo into Photoshop or whatever, and then you'll just basically manually do what the phone does. That to me seems, it's a little hypocritical, and it's sort of like a logical fallacy in a way. It's kind of like, well, I guess like it's a difference between driving a manual versus like automatic car. I guess the digital art is still sort of you doing it, but it's you manually putting the inputs as opposed to like just putting auto settings. I don't know. For me personally, I think I value, especially with the rise of like AI and just like being able to prompt an image to be made to look very hyper realistic. I think now I appreciate raw photography more than ever, especially considering how much effort, time, money, and like patience it takes to actually go into the field and take a real raw photo. I think it's underappreciated. Some of these lenses that these photographers have are tens of thousands of dollars. Their camera, like thousands as well. The amount of effort they're putting in to go to like remote locations or hard to get to locations, wearing like, in some cases the weather like not the best. Might be a lot of snow, a lot of rain, hail. There could be like wildlife. There's like things they have to do to keep safe and protected while they're out there. And then they trek all that expensive equipment through like this treacherous environment. And then they sit there fiddling. And I've had times where like I'm trying to capture like a good shot of the moon, and I'm just being like completely ambushed by mosquitoes to the point where it's beyond like everything tolerable, and it's just impossible to even like function. Even if you're fully covered up, it's like they're somehow getting into like your skin. So if someone's going to spend all that time out there against like these odds, really trying conditions, and they're just going to take a really great raw photo, I I would appreciate that as opposed to sitting kind of like in the comfort of your home, sipping a wine. And realistically, with the rise of AI, eventually you're just going to see like, okay, I'm going to put my quick photo in that I took with my camera, and then you're going to prompt the AI, make this look better, and give me 30 different options on how it looks better. And then you just will pick like five, and then you'll take those five, and then you'll reprompt it again to make it even better. And then it's kind of like, well, how much of that is you? Like, and like, is it real? And I don't know. I think for me, in the rise of, it sort of harkens back to like different movements in art. So you look at like classical art, like kind of very realistic, very like beautiful, like just like incredible like pictures of like, I don't know, like angels, whatever you want to. And then you have like Picasso, and I'm going to get a lot of heat for this. Granted, he has a ton of accolades, very successful. The paintings are very expensive, but it's not good art. Like, it's just not. It's simple. And I know everyone's gonna say, "Well, that's not what art." Like, listen, I feel like art takes talent and skill, time and effort. And I'm not saying I'm any of those things. Don't get me wrong. This is like, here's the unqualified person being like, this is how it should be done. And I know that's what I sound like, and I'm sorry. So disregard what I'm saying if you're taking offense to what I'm saying. But the reality is, I feel like we're really dropping the standard for everything when it comes to like the arts, and then we're getting less quality art. And sorry that my art isn't up the quality. So this is more of like introspect on myself as well, is that I should be striving for better quality video. I should be striving for better quality photos. Granted, some of that is very like, there's a paywall basically to get into photography and stuff like that. There's ways to get used stuff and you know grants, and there's ways to kind of help fund it, but yeah, it's difficult, and I don't know. Like, I feel like all artists should strive for perfection, and when you just pick like an art form that's simple and it can pass for being poor, and it's just like, oh, that's just my style. Your style's like being bad, and that's kind of summarizing me as well, because I do put a lot of stuff out there that maybe I'm not 100% happy with, or the camera just couldn't capture properly, and even no amount of editing can fix. And I'm not saying there's no skill involved with digital editing when you go into like Photoshop or whatever. There definitely is. There's a lot of skill. There's a learning curve, everything to that. But I don't want to say the editing part is photography. People like say, "Oh, that is photography." Photography has like a bunch of things under its umbrella. I'm like, I don't know about that. Not too sure about that. I think maybe it's actually photography in and of itself is simply the capturing of photons and trying to make that as accurate to the human experience, or like the lived experience, as possible, and to share that with others. I think that's core photography. And then anything beyond that, you start getting into different disciplines. Digital editing, that's its own discipline. You can't incorporate stuff from photography, but you can incorporate like a bunch of different stuff. And then the next part of the argument is sort of like, well, what about like astral photography? What about macro photography? Or even like, I guess, micro photography. So you have these things that are like, okay, you're going to take a long exposure picture of the stars, and you're going to get the cloudiness of the Milky Way. You're going to get all these, the stars lined up, all that stuff. And you're going to basically see the night sky in a way you wouldn't really normally see it by staring at it. Is that an accurate depiction of reality? Well, perhaps it is, because we can't see it, but it's there. Same with macro and micro. Now, is the digital editing something that's actually there, but we don't see it. And it's no, it's actually like it's being doctored and altered in a way to present something that wasn't there. So that's how I kind of defend that point of view on that topic, but or that point of our contention. But yeah, that's basically how I feel. I feel like there's kind of like this idea of what photography is or what it should be. I feel like people, I don't know. There was some like I've always tried to be as cordial and polite and analytic as possible. And when I don't know, like people will start using name calling or borderline insults, and I do my absolute best to refrain from doing that because I think it always makes me look. One, it's like, it's unbecoming. It never looks good. I feel like to ever like become like that online. But another point is like, there's been times where people like message me after seeing like being kind of like shamed or something, or like insulted. And they're like, oh, like, I commend you for not like reverting to like that lower mind and being like, oh yeah, your photos are terrible, blah 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 blah. Blah, 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 blah. So basically, some of the type of insults I was receiving, or maybe they're not even insults, maybe they're just accurate criticisms. But it's kind of like, yo, your photos are trash, or your content is trash. Nobody will ever like it. No one will ever buy your stuff. And it's kind of like, yeah, perhaps. I do have some fans, like obviously you guys, whoever's listening to this right now, or you're a fan of this, at least the podcast. And when someone throws that kind of shade at you, you're kind of like, most people would think, oh, this person's going to say, he's going to come back with like, your stuff is trash. And it's kind of like, no, I'm not going to sink to that level. Like, I see what he's saying. But so like basically, but the point that I took away from that outside of the insult was like, so like in a way that person was kind of admitting, yeah, I make my photos unrealistic because that's what people like and that's what sells. And it's kind of like fair, but are you making what you like or are you making what other people like? Now that's a very different thing. So are you creating for yourself or are you creating for others? And that to me, like this is where it gets kind of like artsy dartsy type of thing. So for me, like I really like heavily edited photos. Like they're beautiful. Like I wish I could make stuff like that. So I'm not being like jealous by any way or being like, oh, I can't do that. Oh, I'm upset about it. I think it deserves all the accolades it has. I'm not crapping on it at all. I was merely just pointing out that it's not an accurate depiction of reality. And that doesn't mean it has to come with all these other connotations that you may put into your own head when you hear that, like not as good, fake, blah blah blah, like whatever. Like that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying when you took that photo, it looked like one thing, and now it looks like another. Like you took a picture of a green bird and now it's red. Like that bird wasn't red. And I don't know. I just feel like that does like I don't know why that got so much heat. I don't know. Maybe someone just couldn't make the correlation, or they just made assumptions based on what I said. And what else I thought about when I read that comment was sort of like, how often does Joe Nobody see like a beautiful picture, and they're like taken by it, and they're just like, "Oh my God, you took this photo? This is the greatest photo ever! I can't believe it." And then like you sort of inform them like, "Oh well, there's a lot of digital editing. It's a composite. I use layers, this and that." No, it didn't really look like that. Then all of a sudden, kind of like the majesty or like sort of like the magic or like the they're like mystified, and that sort of like, oh, I can't believe it, this is amazing, like that like sparkle in their eye from looking at it just fades, and they're just like, oh, this wasn't, so it's not real. And I think a lot of like, I'll call them like Joe somebody or like normie or someone that's not really informed on photography or like digital editing. I think a lot of those people, like especially me, when like before I started getting into photography and stuff and videography, was that I thought these were like accurate depictions of reality. They were just like really rare moments, or like they were like, okay, at this time of day for like this span of 5 minutes, the sun's going to rise over this peak and it's going to create this like perfect lighting in this forest because the foliage is like this. And and it's going to create like the moisture in that ground is going to rise up and it's going to give like this perfect like smoky haze, like, and then you realize sort of that stuff is all kind of like added in, and it's not like a real accurate depiction of reality. And I think like a lot of people, once they realize that, they don't value it as much. So I feel like to a certain degree there's a bit of deception going on by photographers where they're sort of like selling a lie. It's not like people think like this is real or something like that. Maybe that's a bit too audacious, or maybe I'm not giving people enough credit for being like that knowledgeable. I'm sure if someone's buying art or like photography that they're aware of that to some degree, or maybe not. Maybe some people just like have too much money to know what to do with. I don't know. But anyway, that's my 2 thoughts on that. Disclaimer: I'm not saying the art is bad. I'm not saying the photos are bad. I guess there is a little bit of shade being thrown there. It's like you're making up from your lack of effort in the field to putting it into the office. Maybe that could be the only thing that someone could kind of take offense from, but at the same time, I know the reason for it, and I think I've touched on it in this podcast so far, was that it's sometimes unbearably bad, and you can't possibly trek all of your lenses out there, all these cases. Like you can pack a backpack with multiple lenses, and you can have some pretty versatile ones, but chances are like you're always going to be put in that position where it's like, man, is the one I didn't bring or whatever, or like batteries, what have you, like screens, like all that stuff. Anyway, guys, I think that's it. I think that's all I wanted to kind of talk about. I had another topic I wanted to go into, but I can't remember it. So maybe I'll just do that in another podcast later this week or next week. Anyway, take care, guys. Follow me on X, the X app, Chicha. I like posting on there. If you click on my replies, you can see me replying to some pretty cool posts. Pretty much on brand for what I follow. Obviously, I'm a big Musk fan and of all the kind of stuff he does. So you do get a little bit of that peppered in there, and you might not like Musk or whatever, so you can kind of ignore that. But for the most part, you're going to see me commenting on some pretty cool photos or videos that mostly have to do with animals, some wildlife, some nature stuff and all that stuff. And then, if you don't really know how to sort your own way through X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, my page going into the replies will probably help you find some of those accounts that might be, if you're really into nature and wildlife, it'll help you. Like, okay, Epion's replying to this guy a lot, and this guy's always posting really cool videos, or this guy's already posting like really cool pictures. Like, I feel like if you go into my reply section, you'll really enjoy it. Obviously, my highlights is where I try to put most of my video content and stuff like that. Oh, I should talk about something. Like a couple weeks ago, I did a giveaway for like these boring mugs, like the Boring Company mugs. I did like a pretty cool shot where I try to capture the peak of a mountain through the center of the mug, because there's a hole in this mug, because Boring Company is like a tunnel company. Nobody actually entered that competition by the deadline. I think you had to like and comment and be following me. I can't remember the rules exactly, but I remember when I looked through it, nobody had done any of those things. And I think one person that commented after the closing date. So literally, like, and it's so weird because people will like it, like they liked it, they liked that post, but then they didn't like actually read it, or they didn't want to enter it, but they liked the concept of it. I don't know. So that's why a winner was never announced, and that's why the mugs never went. So I have these mugs still. I need to give them away, but I'm not sure how I'm going to do it. I think I'm just going to leave them somewhere. I'm going to go into like, I don't know. I'm thinking like my knee-jerk reaction is like Starbucks in Banff. I'm going to sit down, have a latte on a day that's not busy. Like, I'm not going to go on the weekend. I'm going to book a day off, go during the week, have myself a latte, just, chill, put a little sticky note on the mug like, hey, this is who I am. This is why I'm leaving it here. I think I should leave a book there too. That's the other thing. I've always been kind of working on books. I have like 3 different books that I'm writing, and none of them are close to finished. And I don't even know if they'll ever be finished. It's like I sort of get like wrapped up in like this idea of writing, and I have like different ideas for different books. It'd be really cool if I could get one finished, and then I could start leaving those around as sort of like weird little, like, I don't know, gifts to people, mystery gifts. Oh, sorry, my throat. I was out driving all day. I did one of those Sunday drives where you just kind of go to clear your mind. You're not really going anywhere. I drove from about basic, we'll call it Red Deer, Alberta, just to spare people from knowing like that. It's basically a city between Edmonton and Calgary, and Edmonton is in the north, Calgary's in the south, and then in the center is a city called Red Deer. And I'm not exactly there, but approximately there. And then I drove over west all the way to Golden, BC. I just did that, and I came back, and I was kind of hoping to see some wildlife and this and that, or some nice shots. But it was basically overcasty a lot. It was kind of like snowing like a little bit. I saw some bighorn sheep and stuff like that, but it wasn't as it wasn't normally how I like to take videos or photos of animals. It's kind of like weird when they're near the side of the road, especially in like kind of like a semi-busy area. They feel less wild. They don't really. It's not really the same, you know. Also, like sometimes the highway and the road can be dangerous to like kind of like park to the side, especially if it's not allowed. Like, so I don't know. There's so many complications with that, and I don't really want to get in trouble or anything. So I kind of just leave it alone. But there were some pretty big rams. Like I looked at those and I was like, oh, those are some pretty big boys. Kind of impressive, kind of cool. And they were sort of like walking along the side of a fence trying to find that wildlife bridge. Yeah, I don't know. What else could I talk about really now that I got your attention? I think that's it, folks. Yeah, I had some other topic that was kind of spicy, like the photography one, but I can't remember it for the life of me. Can't remember it at all. So, I'll say that for another day. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening. Yeah, hope you like my videos. Cheers.